we know that secant of theta is equal to 4. If you know secant of theta is equal to 4, which other trig ratio do you know? Cos. So if secant of theta is equal to 4, cos of theta is equal to 1 over 4. And we'll always try to take those reciprocal ones and change them back into the ones that we're more familiar with, because that's going to make our life easier. Now, if cos of theta is equal to 1/4 and it's an angle in standard position, where would it be? Well, 1/4 is positive, right? So it could be in quadrant 1 or quadrant 4, right? Okay. Now, in part A, they're only looking, they tell us that we're only looking between 0 and 180 degrees. That's only quadrant 1 and quadrant 2. So for part A, if cos of theta is positive and we're only looking between 0 and 180 degrees, then that angle has to be in quadrant 1. If I make a triangle with my reference angle, which sides of that triangle can I label? I can label the adjacent side, right, and the hypotenuse. Do mental math for a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Is it square root of 15 or square root of 17? This time it's the square root of 15 because the 4 is your hypotenuse. So you'd have to do 16 minus 1 to get 15. So now we have our triangle with all the things labeled. Determine the exact values of the other trig ratios. Well, we already did secant and cos. Now we can find out what sine of theta and cosecant of theta are, tan of theta and cotangent of theta. Well, sine, opposite over hypotenuse, square root of 15 over 4. Since we're in quadrant 1, everything is positive. Tan, opposite over adjacent. And then our reciprocals, all we do is the reciprocal of the ratio so we have all the other trig ratios between 0 and 180. Now, part B says solve for theta for all the values between negative 360 to 360. So unlike part A, in part A, because we were going from 0 to 180 degrees, we could just think about quadrant 1. But now, because we're going from negative 360 to 360, we have to think about all 4 quadrants. So when I draw my picture here, I'm going to draw an angle in quadrant 1 just like I did before, with this as a reference angle, and this we figured out was 1 and 4 and the square root of 15. And I'm also going to draw a triangle with a reference angle in quadrant 4. And now this would be 1 and this would be 4 and this is the square root of 15. Those triangles are exactly the same size, just one is in quadrant 1 and the other is in quadrant 4. Now, we start with secant theta is equal to 4. The first thing you would do is, again, change that to cos of theta is equal to 1/4. And if we think about our reference angle, so I'm going to add a little r here to say I'm going to think about my reference angle. In that triangle, if I wanted to solve for that angle, what do? How do you figure out what theta is or what the reference angle is? We have to use the inverse. Cos inverse of 1/4. So we go to our calculator. and we type in cos inverse of 1/4, we get 75.5. This question says to the nearest degree, so I'm going to round 75.5 already to the nearest degree of 76 degrees. That's our reference angle. And once we know what our reference angle is, we can now solve for our angle. Now our angle, they told us to find all of them between negative 360 and 360 degrees. And so when I'm thinking about circles, or when I'm thinking about angles and going all the way around a circle, and they give me some negative values and some positive values, I split it up. I think about my positive values first. So my positive values would be from 0 to 360. Does that make sense? That's once around the circle in the positive direction. If I look at my diagram, if I start here, can you see that this will be the first angle that I will hit? What is that angle equal to? 76 degrees. Perfect. It's exactly the same as my reference angle. If I look at quadrant 4 and I go around until I hit that, what will that angle be? $284. You could take 360 degrees and subtract your 76. Those are my positive ones. If I look at my negative ones, that'll be 0 to negative 360 degrees. And so now I go back to those diagrams and I think, oh, here's my first negative one. What is that going to equal? It's going to be negative 76. And the other one will be negative 284 degrees. And again, you could think all the way around would be negative 360, and then you'd have to add your 76 to that. In fact, when I'm thinking about my negative angles, I just pretend things are positive and add a negative at the end. I'll tell you your questions for this one are 9, 10, and 11.